What's the UN all about? The UN is about peace in the world, but it's also about prosperity and the human community. And as a human community, being able to decide where do we want this world to go and be in a few years. Now, all these people on the planet, they're represented by the member states. The member states get together in the United Nations and they, representing their peoples, hopefully, are defining here's the goals, here's what we want to try to shoot for, and they achieve agreement for achieving those goals. The problem right now is in so many fields in the SDGs. We talk about all the achievements and things like this, and we have to go all the way back to the Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs, and we really see there was great progress made, especially in the first 10 years of the MDGs. But in the last 5 years of the MDGs and the first 5 years of the SDGs, a lot of that progress has slowed down. And a number of the SDG fields, there have been knowledgeable people in those fields that have really said there's been negligible progress made in a lot of those fields. Was mentioned the importance of education, especially in light of the young people. And Andrea Schleicher, the head of the OECD PISA program that evaluates the international progress in the field of education, just said at the end of last year, there has been no significant progress made in the past decade in the field of education. And if we take a look and see with its large population how much China has advanced, somebody else in the world has been declining. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be able to say it's not a question of no progress, but how much have we fallen behind? There's a lot of efforts underway about evaluating what kind of progress we're making in a lot of areas of the SDGs. But we really have to ask if we're on track. When we look to measure that, what are the concrete, comprehensive plans for actually achieving the SDGs? Or do we just go and say there's goals out there now, please everybody go and let's achieve those goals? That's sort of like the churches saying, okay, everybody go home now and follow the golden rule. And if all that worked, we wouldn't need any police departments or any correctional institutes and so forth. So we can't just rely on appeals for people and states to do what's needed. Somewheres there needs to be some goals. And the question is, who has these goals? So we have our three parties, the UN represented by the General Assembly, and we have our NGOs and civil society. Now, the UN, they did the first part. They got the member states to agree. Here's a set of goals, 17 goals, 168 or so targets that we want to achieve by 2030. And the member states are the ones that are responsible for doing that. The UN doesn't say, okay, we now accept the responsibility. We, the UN, will drive the achievement of that goal. They can drive it by the bully pulpit and going out and saying, let's do this. And they can have influence through their agencies. But by and large, it is not the role of the UN to do. It's the role of the UN to agree, which they've done. So now we get to our NGOs and civil society, which are the partners of organizations like the UN and the member states who can contribute to helping achieve those goals. So how well are we doing that? Well, there's a structure for a lot of our NGOs. There's 10 million NGOs in the world, but there's a structure within the UN to have umbrella organizations, committees. The question is, what are they doing? What are these partner umbrella organizations to the UN doing? Do they have goals? Or have they established goals that are in alignment with the goals of the corresponding committees and so forth at the UN? If that were the case within education, we could say, okay, our goals are to make sure every child's in school, make sure every child is achieving the minimal foundation knowledge by a certain age or roughly, and ensuring that everybody leaves school with the proper attitude and knowledge to be able to build upon to continue their lives. But do we have those kind of goals? Our committees, we meet periodically. Do we talk about the measurement? How much progress have our family of NGOs and civil society within our particular field? Are we talking about what progress have we made? Are we on track? What do we need to change if we're not on track? Are we doing that? Or do we go and we listen to some nice little presentation by somebody about some place somebody is doing something, and then we all stand, well, before COVID, would stand around and say hi to everybody, and then we go away and say, hey, see you next month. Do our committees add value? Do these umbrella organizations add value? And if they're not adding value, if they're not contributing to their member organizations being able to be valuable partners, effective partners to the corresponding departments and committees in the UN, and they're not adding value to what their members are doing, what's their purpose? It's not enough to be able to say, well, all the NGOs, everybody's doing things. There are hundreds of thousands, there are millions of projects going on in this world that all relate back in one way or another to one or another SDG. In fact, in Rotary, we've got 65,000 clubs, if we count our youth clubs around the world. And each of them is doing 3 or 4 major projects. So we can look at that alone and say, we've got more than 250,000 significant projects in the world just within Rotary. Lions has similar, and there's a dozen other organizations out there doing things. And keep in mind, there's 10 million NGOs in some way, shape, or form. But what's happening with the aggregate needle? We have to remember it's not about what we do, it's about what we achieve. And if we're not achieving, does it really make a difference? If we go and we rebuild homes for people in a floodplain without considering it's going to get washed away again next year because we didn't think big enough when we were taking those actions? We need bridges between our NGOs and our civil society and the corresponding departments within the UN to make sure that somebody is making sure that the contributions of the NGOs and civil society are in line with what the UN, the member states collectively have set up as the goals. I think it starts a little bit with expectations. I haven't been involved with the UN that long, maybe 3-4 years, but I hear rumblings that the UN has started to question, are the NGOs really delivering? Is this where we should put our faith that they're really going to significantly help? Or do they see the NGOs and civil society as people just banging on the door and say, I want a seat, I want a seat? Do they see the NGOs as just looking at an opportunity to boost their image by saying, I'm a consultative partner to the UN? The UN can play a significant role by saying, these are the expectations, especially to the umbrella organizations, to say, we have these goals in the form of the SDGs. Either you guys are an effective partner for helping your family of organizations contribute to achieving those goals, or we really can't afford to waste our time with you. And I think if the UN was more deliberate in setting those expectations, that would result in the family of the associations, the umbrella organizations, the committees, going out there and saying, you know what, we better be able to show the value we're adding between all of our member organizations and the UN. We've got to justify our existence. And our existence can't be because we just helped people be able to get through the door and we help people be able to meet with certain people of influence. It's really got to get down to saying that we are doing something with our communities of members to bring about the achievement of the goals. We're a third of the way through the SDGs. Are we a third of the way from where we were 5 years ago towards the achievement of the SDG goals? I don't think there's a lot of areas where we can say that's true. So what have we done? What is the collection of NGOs and civil society done to get us on track to be able to deliver on that? Or do they see themselves as saying, no, we'll advise the UN, we'll tell the UN what they should be doing? Somewhere we've got to make sure that these umbrella organizations, these committees, these associations are at least setting goals that are in line with the goals of the United Nations, i.e. the SDGs, and that they measure progress. They hold themselves accountable to delivering against those goals. Now, many are going to say, well, we have no way how we're going to achieve those goals. Well, you don't need to know how you're going to do it to set goals. If we knew how to do everything, they'd be just getting done. We have to remember, if we don't aim for it, we're not likely to achieve it. So it starts off, set the goals, and then let's figure out and bring our people together and our member organizations to say, okay, now the goal's there. It is what it is. How do we get there? We have to remember what Michelangelo said. The problem for most people is not that they set goals too high and fail, but they set their goals too low and succeed. The only thing that's truly impossible is what we don't attempt. So my challenge to the UN, set the expectations for the parties you partner with, that they deliver something effectively. And to the associations and committees, set goals that are in line with the SDGs and do something with your community to make sure that you're working towards those goals and organize your members along those lines. In other words, dare to be great.